As a chaplain, I've guided countless souls through their final moments. I've heard their last confessions, their final hopes. But when 3 different patients on their deathbeds described the same chilling figure, a man with truly black eyes, my faith was tested. And then he came for me. This is a story not about faith found, but about faith profoundly, terrifyingly tested, and irrevocably changed. My name is Father Thomas, and for 30 years I have walked the hushed, often somber halls of St. Jude's Hospital as a chaplain. My ministry isn't about grand sermons or packed pews. It's about the quiet intimacy of human suffering, hope, and the profound mystery of the final threshold. I've offered comfort, solace, and a steady hand to countless souls as they approach their final moments. I've heard their last confessions, their final hopes, their whispered regrets. I've seen the raw grief of families, the quiet acceptance of the elderly, the heartbreaking struggle of the young. My calling is to bring spiritual peace to those at life's end, to assure them they are not alone, that there is light beyond the fading darkness. I believe in God, in grace, in the transcendent power of love. My faith is, or rather was, the unshakable bedrock of my existence. But when you spend decades at the precipice of eternity, witnessing the inexplicable, some foundations begin to crack, especially when the dying all start to whisper about the same dark presence, a presence that defies every teaching, every comforting promise, a man with truly black eyes. It began subtly, as these things often do. A comment here, a murmured observation there. Old Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, devout woman nearing 90, with an aggressive cancer that was slowly consuming her, was one of the first. I sat with her often, holding her frail hand, reciting psalms. One afternoon, as the setting sun cast long shadows across her room, she gripped my hand, her eyes wide, not with fear, but with a strange, unnerving lucidity. "He's here again, Father," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The man with the black eyes. He's standing at the foot of my bed, always there, just watching." I followed her gaze, but saw nothing but the empty space. I gently reassured her, attributing it to medication or the natural disorientation of her condition. "It's just the shadows, Mrs. Henderson," I told her, my voice calm, professional. She shook her head, a faint sad smile on her lips. "No, Father. He doesn't blink." She passed away peacefully in her sleep that night. I offered her family comfort, still believing I had understood her last vision. A few weeks later, Mr. Davies, a gruff, atheist businessman who had suffered a massive stroke, started to make similar remarks. He was a man who scoffed at religion, at anything he couldn't quantify or explain. Yet in his final days, his mind slowly unraveling, he would fixate on the empty corner of his room, pointing a trembling finger. His speech was slurred, but the words were terrifyingly clear. "Black eyes," he'd gasp, his voice raspy, filled with a primal, visceral fear that seemed completely out of character for such a stoic man. "He's there, always there." I tried to soothe him, but his terror was palpable. Unlike Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Davies did not pass peacefully. His last moments were filled with a silent, wrenching terror, his eyes wide and unfocused, as if staring directly into the abyss. It was an unsettling end, and his words about black eyes began to gnaw at me. Then came the third patient, a young mother named Sarah, barely 30, whose body was failing after a sudden, aggressive illness. She had a husband, 2 small children. Her room was always filled with light and the murmur of prayers from her family. As her condition worsened, she became increasingly agitated, her eyes darting nervously towards the foot of her bed. "He's always there when the light fades," she whispered to me one evening, her voice hoarse, her face pale. "The man with no face, only those black, empty eyes. He never speaks, just waits." This time, the chill that went down my spine was more than just empathy. It was a cold, creeping dread. 3 different patients, 3 different lives, 3 different personalities, all describing the exact same terrifying figure, a man with black eyes. It was a coincidence that defied every logical explanation, every comforting assumption. I started to feel a prickle of unease, a subtle shift in the very atmosphere of the hospital. I found myself lingering longer in the rooms of the dying, my gaze unconsciously drawn to the foot of their beds. I searched for anomalies, for reflections, for anything that could explain what these patients were seeing. I found nothing. Only the sterile, familiar order of a hospital room. Yet the unease persisted, growing into a cold, persistent knot in my stomach. My colleagues, hardened by years of medical practicality, dismissed my concerns. "Hallucinations, Father," Dr. Evans, the head of oncology, would say with a kind but dismissive wave of his hand. "Part of the disease process, or the medication. The brain does strange things when it's shutting down." I knew this. I had seen it countless times. But the consistency of the descriptions, the chilling sameness of the black-eyed man, felt different. It was too specific, too uniform to be random figments of dying minds. I found myself questioning my own clinical detachment, my own ability to rationalize the unexplainable. My faith, which had always been my unwavering guide, began to feel like a fragile shield against an unseen, encroaching darkness. The hospital itself, a place I had considered sacred ground, a haven of healing and human connection, began to feel different. The long corridors, usually a source of quiet contemplation for me, now seemed to stretch into an unsettling infinity, their shadows deepening with unspoken secrets. The gentle hum of machines, once a comforting reassurance of life sustained, now felt like a low, incessant drone, a prelude to something ominous. I found myself checking the corners of rooms, my eyes darting nervously, searching for the figure the dying described. I was, for the first time in my career, genuinely afraid, not for myself, but for the souls I was meant to comfort, for the peace I was meant to bring. The experience of these patients profoundly altered my ministry. I found myself struggling to offer the usual comforting words, the reassurances of light and peace, when a part of me wondered if a dark, silent sentinel was truly waiting. I started to include more specific prayers for protection, for guidance through unseen valleys, my voice taking on a new, urgent timbre. I spent more time in the hospital chapel, not just in prayer, but in quiet contemplation, wrestling with the terrifying implications of what I was hearing. I began researching, not medical texts, but ancient texts, theological treatises on evil, on the nature of spirits, on the unseen forces that might exist at the periphery of our understanding. My scientific mind, honed by years of rational thought, was at war with something far older, far more primal. The turning point came one night when I was called to the bedside of a new patient, Mr. Sterling, an elderly man admitted for a sudden, aggressive heart condition. His family had just left, their faces etched with a familiar, weary grief. The room was dim, illuminated only by the soft glow of the monitor and the single low night light. I sat beside him, reading a passage from the Bible, the words feeling hollow. insubstantial in the heavy atmosphere. He was fading fast, his breathing shallow, his pulse thready. I paused, sensing his weakening state, preparing for the final blessing. And then, his eyes, which had been unfocused, suddenly snapped open. They were wide, clear, and fixed on something I couldn't see. A look of profound, primal terror contorted his features. His body tensed, a sudden, convulsive shudder running through him. He pointed a trembling, skeletal finger toward the foot of his bed. His voice, a mere whisper, was filled with an agonizing, desperate fear. "He's here, Father," he gasped, his breath hitching. "The man, the black eyes, he's coming for me." My blood ran cold. The words, the terror in his eyes, felt impossibly real. My gaze snapped to the foot of the bed. It was empty. The usual hospital chair sat there, innocuous, devoid of any presence. I tried to reassure him, to calm his frantic breathing. "There's no one there, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice perhaps a little too shaky, a little too strained. "It's just me, and God is with you." He didn't hear me. His eyes remained fixed, wide with terror. His breath grew shallower still, and then, as I watched, something shifted in the air. A subtle distortion, a ripple in the fabric of the room, like heat rising from asphalt on a summer day, but colder, far colder. The hair on my arms stood on end. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen oppressive weight. The monitors, usually a steady rhythm, let out a single sharp beep, then flatlined. Mr. Sterling went completely still, his eyes still wide, fixed on that empty space at the foot of his bed, frozen in a silent scream. He was gone. I sat there, frozen myself, the Bible in my trembling hands. I hadn't seen a figure, not in the way he had, but I had felt it. I had felt the profound, chilling shift in the atmosphere, the heavy presence. The absolute terror in Mr. Sterling's eyes had been undeniable. It wasn't the natural fear of death. It was the terror of confronting something malevolent, something truly evil. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the silent halls of the hospital, my mind reeling, my bedrock faith fractured. I knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that something dark and unseen was preying on the dying in St. Jude's. The black-eyed man wasn't a hallucination. He was real, and he was here. My ministry changed completely after that night. My sermons, once filled with gentle reassurances of divine love, now spoke of unseen battles, of the need for spiritual armor, of a darkness that preyed on the vulnerable. Some colleagues looked at me strangely. The administration suggested I take a leave of absence, citing stress. But I couldn't leave. How could I, knowing what I knew? My new mission became not just to comfort the dying, but to protect them, to stand sentinel against the unseen predator. I started anointing the rooms, praying over the beds, fortifying the spiritual defenses of the hospital. I walked the night shifts, a lone figure moving through the dim corridors, my eyes scanning, my senses alert, constantly searching for that subtle ripple, that heavy presence. I never saw the full figure of the black-eyed man with my own eyes, not in the way the patients did, but I continued to feel his presence, a cold, oppressive weight that seemed to settle in the rooms of those nearing the end. The consistency of the patient accounts continued. "He doesn't blink," they'd whisper, "just watches. His eyes are like holes. He told me it was time." These phrases became a chilling litany, a chorus of terror from the dying. I realized he wasn't there to take souls, not directly. He was there to instill fear, to witness the final agony, perhaps to feed on it, He was a harbinger of dread, a silent, malevolent observer at the gates of death. My comfort, my prayers, my presence became a small light against his encroaching shadow. I believe he hated my presence, hated the peace I tried to bring. He wanted them to go out in terror, alone and consumed by dread. There were nights when I would sit vigil with a dying patient, praying, reciting scripture, feeling the heavy presence in the room, knowing he was there. I would feel a distinct coldness, a prickle on my skin, an oppressive silence that crushed all sound. And I would pray harder, my voice rising in defiance, my focus unwavering. I often felt a deep, profound sense of rage coming from that unseen corner, an invisible fury at my attempts to bring comfort. But I persisted. I had to. One evening, I was with a young boy, only 8 years old, dying of an aggressive brain tumor. His parents had left for a short break, exhausted and heartbroken. I sat by his bed, holding his tiny, feverish hand, reading him a children's story, trying to bring him a moment of peace. I felt the familiar cold dread creep into the room. The oppressive weight settled. I knew he was there, the black-eyed man. I tightened my grip on the boy's hand and began to pray, my voice strong and clear, invoking every blessing, every protective verse I knew. I felt the air grow colder, the pressure intensify. I didn't waver. I kept praying, my eyes fixed on the boy, my voice a shield against the encroaching darkness. And then, just for a moment, I saw it. Not a full figure, but a subtle distortion in the air at the foot of the bed, a shimmer of absolute blackness, a deeper void in the already dim light. It was there, then it was gone. The coldness receded, the heavy presence lifted. The boy, who had been agitated moments before, sighed softly and drifted into a peaceful sleep. He passed away quietly later that night, without fear, his face serene. He didn't mention the black-eyed man. That night was a victory, a small, precious defiance against the darkness. It affirmed my new purpose. My faith, though tested and transformed, was stronger than ever. It was no longer a comforting blanket, but a sharpened sword. I continued my ministry at St. Jude's, a sentinel in the shadows, fighting battles no one else could see, for the souls of the dying. I never saw the black-eyed man again, not with my own eyes, but I knew he was always there, lurking, waiting. And I was always ready for him. Hello, friends. Thank you all for joining me on this chilling journey. Your support means everything to me, and I absolutely love reading your reactions and personal experiences in the comments section. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat or sent shivers down your spine, please make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing for more haunting tales. Have you ever experienced anything similar to this? Or perhaps you have your own unexplainable story to share. I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Each of your stories adds another fascinating layer to our growing community of horror enthusiasts. And if you think someone else might enjoy a good scare, don't forget to share this video with them. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories. And remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to any of us. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, if you dare.